The idea that an experiential reality is a construct designed to impair the individual's ability to function without an external framework is one that was brought into clearer view in the original movie The Matrix. Though presented as a fictional storyline, The Matrix, according to 30-plus-year investigative journalist and author Jon Rappoport, is quite real. By digging deep into the history of propaganda, information control, and human psychology, Jon has put together an absolutely incredible thesis that explains how reality is created for the masses rather than by them. But he doesn't just stop at presenting the issue of a matrix-like existence. Jon explains that by reclaiming individual power, ignited chiefly through creative imagination, we can begin to design our own reality rather than allowing the Matrix to do it for us. Jon Rappoport, it is such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show today. You know, I've been so looking forward to speaking with you and to hear your perspective on two key ideas that I hope we can somehow flush out in our discussion, at least preliminarily. And that's what we call, or what we'll call, constructed reality, what has also been popularly termed the Matrix. And the other idea being creative imagination and the power associated with imagination. Now, the former idea is one that apparently many people, unbeknownst to them, are living within 24/7. The latter is perhaps the key to exiting this matrix. So I want to mention at the outset that you have compiled some absolutely explosive data and evidence to support both models, which are included in your collections, The Matrix Revealed and Exit from the Matrix, respectively. So our talk today will be based primarily on these two collections, these two ideas. I'd like to start out, Jon, the discussion on this matrix of reality. What is it? How is it? And how did the masses become so entrapped within it?
Well, to start with, constructed reality, or the matrix, I would say is a series of layers or levels that people, become aware of. Some people do, in certain ways. For example, political reality. A person may come to the realization that we're really living in a country in America that has one political party with two heads. And despite some differences, there are certain key elements of repression and so forth that just keep rolling on from one administration to another, from one Congress to another. And that these are very much involved with corporations and banks and money and so on and so forth. So people begin to explore how reality is built and constructed because they see what major media have to say about these political parties and about the government and about corporations, and then they realize, well, that's fluff. It's just some sort of game. It's an illusion that's presented to us about certain issues that are in deep conflict, and the conflict at a higher level, though, doesn't really exist. So people begin to get wise to certain elements. But in my research, the point was to go as deep as possible. And so I eventually ended up in the arena of mind control, information control, behavior control, thought control, emotional control, operant conditioning, programming. What is it about human beings that makes them so prone to accepting all sorts of realities that are constructed for them? And in that respect, my work with a late colleague and hypnotherapist, Jack True, in Los Angeles, was a key episode, I would say, in the late 1980s, early 90s. Because one of the first things that Jack said to me was, he said, you can hypnotize a person and you can change their concept of space and time and energy. I said, really? He said, oh, yeah. He said, I've done it numerous times. I said, well, what exactly do you mean? He said, well, start with the idea that start with the idea that the space-time continuum itself is a kind of program, or is a kind of concept or construct that everybody who lives on this planet accepts as, taught, described, perceived, experienced, and so forth. He said, but you can create altered states in which people experience these elements in vastly different ways. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, for example, he said, well, elongated time, expanded space, multiple spaces, different dimensions of space, which he said in therapy I've had clients explore and tell me what they discover in these alternative spaces. Tapping into unused reservoirs of deep energy that could change a person's outlook on life and their own sense of power and well-being and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, that's a pretty deep form of mind control then that we're dealing with. He said, oh yeah, absolutely. And that's where his research ultimately led him, was what is it about the human mind that seems to be prepared to accept a diminished and distorted view of reality as being the one and only reality? Mm-hmm. Why do people fall for that? What is it about their outlook or their basic conditioning or predisposition such that they accept a situation in which, in essence, their own power is fantastically diminished? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so that's where the research really began for me at a much deeper level, because matrix or constructed reality not only involves what other people are, quote, doing to us, but what we're doing to ourselves.
Absolutely.
So that's where it all began.
Wow. Well, I don't know that I heard an answer to that big question. What is it about the human brain or mind, as it were, that seems to have a proclivity to conditioning? I don't know if you're prepared to answer that. I don't know if proclivity is the right word, but rather it's so susceptible to programming, and it seems that's accelerating. How would you answer that in a nutshell, if you could?
Well, I would say that because I've also, in addition to working as an investigative reporter, also been a painter for the last 50 years or so.
I'm aware of that, yes.
I've had many experiences with people looking at my work, looking at the work of other painters, walking through museums, talking to people in museums, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And people want to say that what is invented or created should resemble what's already there. Mm-hmm. They have a propensity to accept realism, in other words. Look at the tree in that painting. It looks exactly like a tree. Isn't that fantastic? And the bowl of fruit. I mean, those apples look real enough to pick up and eat, and so on and so forth. And along with that comes a kind of inbred or inborn sense of harmony, symmetry, balance, etc., that these become not only the aesthetic standards of most people, but they actually bleed into their choices and directions they take in life, and their preferences, what they like and what they don't like about people, about situations, about ideas, etc., etc. And what Jack True discovered, and what we discovered together as we began to do research, was that this was just a layer of programming. Mm-hmm. In other words, there was nothing really final about the idea that reality as presented to us should be final, or that in our creative impulses, we should do nothing more than try to copy it and make it another version of it and repeat it over and over again. And this sort of addiction, which is far more profound than an addiction to drugs, is what drives people to say, well, reality must be as I see it, as I perceive it. It couldn't be anything else because that's what I need. I mean, they're not saying that last part, but that's the addiction part. People they have a great need and hunger for reality as it is presented to them and as they perceive it, and a tremendous aversion to considering the possibility that there are other realities that are far different. And that's what glues people into constructed reality.
I get it. You know, Jon, we could go down a whole nother road with that, but, you know, when you said, I believe, repetition, that the brain, mind, as it were, has this they're habituated toward repetition and routine. It makes me think of the part of the brain that perhaps was activated many years ago. That part of the brain we call the R complex, or some people call it the reptilian brain. Basal ganglia is another term I've heard, and that's where the seat of repetition and routine and ritual lie. And I wonder, you know, as we're talking about the state of affairs with people looking to look at reality that way, if that's the part of the brain that is hyperactive. Do you know what I mean?
I think it is.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay.
I don't think there's any question about it.
Yeah.
I think that is exactly what is activated in most people. And they kind of equate that with the survival impulse.
Absolutely.
So therefore that link is forged, and for most people they don't feel that, you know, there would be any possibility of escape from that. But yeah, the repetition. Okay, I wake up today and it's similar to yesterday, and I do the same things, and the routine is pretty much the same. And this has a very strange sort of satisfaction connected with it, because now I'm on familiar ground, I know what to expect, etc., etc. And if somebody were suddenly to say, well, you know, the space and the time and the energy that you perceive is really just a curtain which could be torn away and then you would see something else entirely, they would say, that's the last thing that I want to get involved with. You know, that's a danger sign. That's something that I have to avoid at all costs, whether they would articulate that or not. That's how they would respond. But in reality, or in, you know, super reality, that's what is liberating. And so one of the elements in my collection, The Matrix Revealed, was a series of interviews. Well, there are about 40 interviews with Jack True. And then there are interviews with a propaganda operative, retired propaganda operative, who uses the pseudonym of Ellis Metaboy. And he described to me in great detail the nuts and the bolts of how he ran very long-term propaganda campaigns on behalf of certain corps of elites around the world, with the, you know, express intention of deceiving the entire global population about certain events and issues and so on.